Well, hey everyone, my name is Nathan Jones, and if you're new here, welcome. I like to talk about all things movies, specifically Blu-rays, and it's been about a month since we've talked about my Q series, my recommendations, the films that I've been watching in my Q recently, the things that I've been watching since, I guess, February 10th is the last time I put a Q series up. So it's literally been about a month since I've done this. And so I've been watching a lot of things, and it's a variety show because I've been all over the place with work and life, and everything's been stressful. And I have a few things that are like difficult watches and some comfort watches and all those things. We're going to get to that in a second. But before I jump into that, I have a few things to show you. One is Aaron Pynn, my good friend, Mr. Cult of Cinema himself, has decided to make some merchandise for his channel. So I did go ahead and pick up one of the shirts, and I wanted to showcase this and also give you, put in the link down below. You can go to the website and order some of your own merch from Aaron. Also his channel, if you haven't seen Aaron Pynn, certainly give him a subscription and watch out for those live stream videos that he likes to do. But here is the shirt that I bought from him right here. There's Cult of Cinema right here. There's Aaron and his lovely self. I love this shirt, and I'm really glad to support him. He's a really good friend of mine. But before we jump into my recommendations, I do want to ask you, what have you been watching for the month of February, for the most of the month of February, and also this early March, because, you know, it's almost halfway through March, which is really, really crazy. But I want to know, what have you been watching recently? And yeah, let me know in the comment section down below. So let's actually jump into the films and TV series that I've been watching for the last month. So let's just jump into it. All right, so I'm going to probably go all over the place here. And the first thing I'm going to be talking about is something I have talked about many times on the channel. In fact, I am still completing this. It's been a year since I've had this, maybe a little bit longer than a year, and I'm still not done with them. But I've been watching a lot of the ESPN 30 for 30s, and this is from the first collection, the first season that happened in the early 2010s and like the late 2000s right here. But I'm really excited to watch these. I just watched Once Brothers, which is, I think, film number 25. Which is a fantastic, fantastic film. And the films that I've been watching in this collection are just phenomenal. I mean, a lot of the films are around 53 minutes long. Some of them are a little bit longer, and they all do vary in the different topic. Obviously, this is all sports related. And they all vary in different, sports, but also different modes of sports and moods and crazy things that have happened. It's just really fascinating to me because, last year when The Last Dance happened, this just sparked a really big interest in sports for me. And I don't know how many of you are sports fans, but these ESPN 30 for 30s, they're great. There's a lot of really good ones. Now, basketball is my sport of choice, and so that's the ones that I really get excited for to watch. And there's quite a few in this particular one. Reggie Miller, Allen Iverson. There's a lot of ones like this that talk about in this particular set. But I'm on film number 27 now, so I literally only have 4 left. 27, 28, 29, and 30. And then I'll jump to season 2, which is across the bay. But yeah, have any of you seen any of these? I know a few of my friends, maybe Sam, old film blogger Sam, and then David Harrington at Cartoon Fortress. I know you guys have seen some 30 for 30s, but I want to know the rest of you, how many of you have watched any of these films? Some of them are really, really good. All right, so let's actually move on from there to two films that I'm actually going to cover a little bit more in depth later on down the road. All right, so this is going to be a little bit of a highlight, and I'm not going to give anything away too much, but I do want to highlight that I have watched a few of these films recently, but I'm not going to talk about them too in depth, because I might actually talk about them in depth in a future video. And the films that I'm talking about was one from 1922, directed by Benjamin Christensen, and I had watched most of this film previously last year, and I actually had watched the 76-minute version from 1968 called Witchcraft Through the Ages, but the original film is Haxan, however you want to say it, from 1922, and I really love this film. As many of you know this, I am huge into cult and into the occult, and I love like The Witch, Hereditary, The Exorcist, a lot of my favorite horror films, and also my love of metal. I like black metal and death metal, and so a lot of that stuff all blends together, and a lot of it comes to a head in this film, which is comedic, horrific, especially for the time period. It's 1922. There's some things in here that you wouldn't expect for the time period, and it's a lot of fun. And it's very informative and scientific for the time period, and it's just a lot of different themes and mashups. Benjamin Christensen himself is the devil. He always likes to do as that. But anyway, that's all I'm going to really say about Hoxton, but I'm sure many of you have seen it, and this Criterion edition is just beautiful. So actually we're going to move on to another film from the 20s. This is actually a set of films, and I actually watched this because of my friend film blogger Sam. He actually mentioned this film and some of his curation that he's bringing back some of his films into his collection. But the movie that I watched by Zhivago is Man with the Movie Camera. And I'm going to talk a lot more about this. I haven't watched any of the other films by Vertov in this set, but I did watch Man with the Movie Camera, and I have a lot to say about it, but I'll talk about it in the future. But I really, really enjoyed it, and like it didn't feel like it came from the time period that it did. But anyway, Man with the Movie Camera, Hoxton, these are great films from the 20s, and I'll talk more about the 20s maybe in a future video. All right, so moving straight from those 20s films, we're actually going to talk about an epic film that has been sitting on my shelf for years, and I have never touched it because of the length of the time, and I just felt like it was a little bit, like I've never been in the mood to watch it, and I finally did, and I'm talking about Dr. Zhivago. And I did mention in a recent video that I had watched this, and yeah, I really enjoyed it because I got the David Lean directs Noel Coward set, so I did talk about David Lean a little bit. But yeah, this is directed by David Lean. This is an epic film, and it talks a lot about Russia and obviously during a revolution period in the early 1900s, and seeing all of those different time periods with all these different characters and a lot of different times and places. But it's just a really, really wonderful film. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed Julie Christie. Alec Guinness is in this film. He's the one kind of giving a flashback. Omar Sharif is Zhivago. He's just got gorgeous eyes in this movie. But yeah, it's an epic. How many of you have seen this movie? The only film that I had seen previously by David Lean was Lawrence of Arabia. So I like that one a little bit better than this movie. And also, I will say, I did watch this in early February, a little bit later after I started my Q series. And so my memory is not too sharp on it, but there's a lot of gorgeous cinematography in this film, a lot of the acting, and the story is quite compelling as well. But there are some parts that, kind of dip in and out. But it is a long film. It's an epic, right? And so how many of you have seen Dr. Zhivago, or how many of you, like me, are a little bit daunted to even start the film because of its length? Actually, that kind of just brings up a bigger question. How many of you have a lot of films on your shelf that are like just super, super long, and you're just like, I don't know when I'm going to get to that, but I know I should, right? But Dr. Zhivago, that's definitely an example for me. Let's actually move on from here to an 80s comedy / horror, I suppose. All right, so we're moving straight from there, from the 60s, all the way up to 1989, in a film that I've been wanting to watch, but I didn't really even know much about. It's actually starring Tom Hanks, and it's In the Burbs. And this is a really fun film. It is, like, this reminds me, okay, so I grew up in the suburbs as well, and I grew up in a lower middle class suburb. We were actually one of the first homes there, so like our house is it wasn't as nice as like the other houses that were built around it or anything. Anyway, it had nothing to do with that, but this film reminded me of when the neighborhood was established. There were some really weird neighbors, right? And in this particular instance, there's this one house in the neighborhood that's just like decrepit and like really weird. There's this weird family that just moved in, and a lot of mysterious things are happening. Everyone in the entire neighborhood is really, really nosy, Tom Hanks included, and all the characters in the neighborhood themselves. I really love how we have Bruce Dern in this film as well, and Corey Feldman. They're two of the nosy neighbors, and we also have Carrie Fisher, who is the husband, or who is the wife of Tom Hanks. But yeah, it's just really fun. It really, really zany. And what I'm getting at is that there are some really nosy neighbors, and they're trying to figure out like what's going on with this this neighbor. They do late night things. The crazy noises come from the house, things like that. And the reason I brought up my neighborhood is I really wish that I had a neighbor like this, instead of the like neighborhood watch committees, or like where stay-at-home husband and wives who feel like it's their job to dictate everything in the neighborhood, and like, oh, you gotta mow your lawn to this certain level, no parking on the side of the street, that bullshit. But anyway, that's a whole nother side rant. But The Burbs is like a horror comedy of sorts, if you will. But yeah, Tom Hanks just plays this nosy neighbor who accidentally, kind of just based on his friend, gets involved in this thing, and it's lunacy. It's like, there's a lot of really crazy antics that happen. It's really funny as well, and there's some really scary parts too. It's not a scary movie or of any sort, but I don't know. How many of you seen The Burbs? Like, I had relatively no knowledge of this film. I picked it up maybe a few months ago, and I'm really happy that I did, because this was a lot of fun. But check out The Burbs if you haven't seen it. It's a Tom Hanks film that I don't think is talked about very much, but it's a lot of fun. All right, so now we're moving all the way up to last year, or I guess a couple years ago. At least that's when this film has its rights said. It came out in 2019 from Red Flower Film, but this is a film that just recently came out on Blu-ray, and it's by a team that I really, really love, and that's Moorhead and Benson, sci-fi directors / writers, and I'm talking about Synchronic. And Synchronic was a lot of fun. This has Anthony Mackie in it and Jamie Dornan, and man, this film was a lot of really creative minds kind of coming together into this interesting science fiction take on like a synthetic drug. So if you're taking this synthetic drug, it can warp you in and out of time at the location that you are at currently, where you're at. If you take the drug right now, wherever I was, just depending on the different time, different part of where you're at, depends on where you go in different times. It's really strange. It's a really great movie though, but it's also really, really dramatic and also really hard to watch, because it's like a disillusion of a friendship and of people trying to take care of each other and hardship in life, and it's just really has this a great amalgam of you really start to care about a lot of these characters, and there's a lot of really great character development because of it, but also on top of this really cool time traveling conception of a synthetic drug. And if any of you haven't seen Synchronic, I'd highly recommend it. And I also would say I would highly recommend all of Moorhead and Benson's work, starting with Resolution. And that one is kind of connected to The Endless, one of their more recent ones. And then there's Spring, which I really love Spring, because Spring it reminds me, or I guess on the back it says it like this, but it's like Richard Linklater's Before trilogy mixed with Lovecraft. And so these cool science fiction concepts with romance. And it's really, really cool. But a lot of their writing I've enjoyed quite a bit, and it's a really cool contemporary writer-director combo. And yeah, Synchronic is a really great piece of work, and I think it's just another ballpark hit in my opinion from this duo. Have any of you seen Synchronic? I want to know down in the comment section down below. Right now we're going to move on to 2008, to a film that bypassed me. I didn't watch it in theaters. It's a film that I remember seeing and I was kind of just rolled my eyes at. I don't exactly know why I rolled my eyes at. I just thought it was really strange. And I think I had more of a conscience back then in 2008 or something. I don't know what was going on at the time. But I'm talking about 2008's Valkyrie with Tom Cruise, and directed by the now kind of awful director Bryan Singer. Not awful in the directing sense, but anyway, Bryan Singer, right? So Valkyrie, this is about the true life events of a team of Germans who worked under the Nazis, who were trying to overthrow Hitler and assassinate him. And so this is a really good movie, actually. I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed this movie. There's a lot of great tension. I think Tom Cruise did a great job. Tom Cruise is a really great actor, just a really weird person, right? But yeah, I think Valkyrie is a really good World War II drama, and just shows some different aspects of some stories that you really don't hear much about, and really haven't been talked about much in history. But Valkyrie is an operation that, to kind of describe it into too much detail, was like a contingency plan for if something happened, and like the SS versus like the army, and like they're just like who's controlling what, and like who will take over if Hitler dies. It's a lot of those convoluted things, and they try to manipulate it into their favor to where they can actually take over, and do this successfully without Himmler and all of Hitler's right hand and left hand men. So Valkyrie. It's a film that I think doesn't get talked about much, but I quite enjoyed it, and it's certainly a good time. And yeah, it's got great direction, and it looks great, and it's got some great acting as well. So Valkyrie. Let's actually move on from here to a science fiction classic. All right, so now we're moving on to a science fiction classic, one of the films that kind of started a lot of the big monster films in like the Cold War period. My timeline's a little skewed with this, but this came out in 1954. So if I believe correctly, this is actually one of the first films in the big monster science fiction, like, you know, animals grow to a huge size and you know, destroy everything. It's them. And this was a really fun film. And if you're definitely in the mood for like just like a Saturday morning, afternoon, that kind of time period film that just kind of like relax you and just like kind of take you back to that period with Cold War angst mixed in with, you know, like the realization through like the lens of like a supersized animal such as ants, for instance. I think it's really cool. And Them is definitely one of those, like I said, prototypes for Godzilla and a lot of the kaiju films that would come after it. And, you know, I really enjoyed it. And I think Them has some really cool effects for the time period. And the animatronics and the practical effects were really, really interesting. Some of them made me laugh, I will say, but I mean, obviously this is 1954, right? But there's also some moments where I'm like, yikes, that's actually pretty terrifying. So yeah, Them. I'm sure some of you have seen it, but I know some of you may have not seen this movie, so you should certainly check this one out, because it definitely is the start to a lot of the other films that would, you know, succeed this one. All right, so let's move on from here to a classic from the 80s from John Hughes. So now we're going to move on to 1986 from a film directed by Howard Deutsch and written by John Hughes. We're talking about Pretty in Pink. It's Paramount Presents film, and I had just recently talked about this film because I actually just recently picked this one up. It's the second in the Paramount Presents films that I own. I own Roman Holiday and I own Pretty in Pink. I need to get more. But I really, really enjoyed seeing this, and I'm glad it got upgraded on Blu-ray. I love these films, and I definitely needed to see Ducky and Molly Ringwald and all of that kind of play out in this film that just, like, you know, took me back to when I was a teenager and I saw these movies for the first time. And I had a really good time with it, and it was a really great revisit. And I think I'm really, really enjoying these Paramount Present films, and I think it's a really great introduction to, you know, these films, and I really love the packaging and care that they seem to be, you know, putting out for these ones. And so, yeah, how many of you actually have seen Pretty in Pink? I'm sure a lot of you have. It's, you know, one of those typical high school romance films where just a lot of things go on, and there's some crazy things that happen that definitely don't happen anymore. There's also a record store, which is really cool. It throws me back to when I used to work at a record store. But yeah, Pretty in Pink. How many of you have seen it? I want to know in the comment section down below. And now we're going to go forward a little bit in 2012, and we're going to talk about a film with Naomi Watts and Ewan McGregor. This is one of the more recent films I watched. I watched this a few nights ago, and I actually have been wanting to watch it for a while, but I had seen it on my shelf. I almost keep picking it up, and I just keep putting it down. I don't know why, but I finally watched 2012's The Impossible, and this is a really, really good movie. And it's directed by J.A. Boyona, who I really like his direction in The Orphanage. That's my favorite film he's done. But unfortunately, he did that Jurassic Park film, Fallen Kingdom. I think that's the second one. Jurassic World, not Jurassic Park. But anyway, we're going to not talk about that. We're going to talk about The Impossible. This is about an actual family and storm that happened in Thailand, and the family that survived this really crazy storm. But I really enjoyed this film, and I wasn't expecting how gruesome this movie was going to be, because it really does show you a lot when it comes to like the wounds and the aftermath and devastation of that storm. And it just kind of comes out of nowhere, which I think is well done with direction, because it almost does feel like a blockbuster film, if that makes sense. And then it kind of shows you that it can be a little bit more gritty than your normal typical blockbuster film. And I think that's what obviously probably why J.A. Boyona was, you know, hired on to do Jurassic World, right? But, you know, we're not talking about that film anymore. But The Impossible, really good movie, really great performances, especially by Naomi Watts, who is really kind of goes through a lot in this movie. And also you get to see a young Tom Holland in this movie. I was like, the first time I saw him, he's like the oldest brother. He's like the oldest brother of the three brothers in this film. And I was like, that looks a lot like Tom Holland's, like, but just, you know, a lot younger. And then as soon as I saw him again in the film, I was like, yep, that's Tom Holland. So it's crazy to me that he's like that young, and it's only been, it's 2012, so this has only been, you know, I guess 9 years now, and he's already this old. So it's weird to see that transformation, to see like this really little kid to like a teenager now. I don't know. Anyway, The Impossible. How many of you have seen this movie? I want to know in the comment section down below. I thought it was a really good one, and I thought it really does show you that blockbuster with grit. And I actually quite enjoyed that, and it also has a lot of heart too, because it's like it's a survival story, so there's a lot going on in it. So it made me cry. A lot of the movies that I have talked about made me cry. Anyway, let's move on from that film to another one. All right, I lied. We're not talking about films. Now we're going to talk about some TV shows, aka a TV show. I was able to finally watch and finish Vikings. I was able to finish Vikings Season 1, Volume 1, and then Vikings Season 1, Volume 2, which was on Amazon Prime. I watched it all, and this is a very satisfying show. I really love following Ragnar's sons, and I don't know how many of you have seen this, but Vikings is a really great show that started on the History Channel, and it kind of, I guess, since then went to Amazon Prime eventually. But it's very consistent. It's a very consistent show that I think the quality of it, it kind of teeters out maybe near the middle, because you're like, okay, where are we going to go with this? But it maintains in its quality all the way throughout to the very end, and there's a lot of really great direction from it, a lot of really cool storylines, and a lot of cool characters that you love seeing, and ones that come and go as these types of shows happen. And yeah, I think History Channel did a really good job of like introducing a show that unfortunately where History Channel has become now, I guess ancient aliens and those kind of mysteries and very conspiratorial things, from where it once was to the stuff that I really enjoyed growing up, where it was like documentaries, and it was talking like maybe some live reenactments with historians talking about certain battles and things like that. I enjoyed those aspects. But you get something where like a show like this, which seems like an HBO type show, or a Starz show, maybe not as gritty, right? But you see like the quality of like an AMC show. I suppose an AMC show would be more, I guess, apt to compare. But yeah, Vikings, I think they hit a really good nerve with this one, and it was a really good show, and I highly recommend if you haven't seen it. I think Amazon Prime has it, and so you can definitely watch it from there. It's a lot of fun, and I honestly would love to start it all over again, because it's been so long since it started off. But I was finally able to watch the last 2 seasons, and yeah, it was a blast. It was nice to watch one episode at a time, and I kind of just divvy it out. And that's kind of how I did it, and how I ended my nights sometimes. So Vikings, how many of you have seen the show? I want to know down in the comment section down below. Let's actually move on from here to some boutique label films that I have seen, starting with Arrow. All right, so the first film that I saw from Arrow Video is a film by Dario Argento. So it is a giallo film, and it is The Cat O' Nine Tails. And this is my, I think, 4th or 5th Argento film that I've seen. And I will say this might be my least favorite of the Argento films. I will say I was kind of in and out of watching when I watched this film, but I really did enjoy it. And I think this film came out a little bit after The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, with, as a part of, I guess, his Animal trilogy, which I haven't seen the other Animal film. But this one came out in 1971, and so it was kind of near the early giallo period. And so this is where I guess he was coming up with some of these concepts and really kind of exploring those themes. And I think Cat O' Nine Tails was a really good representation of that, and I was really excited to watch a film like this, and from Argento, who is somebody I'm still trying to explore, and I also need to just focus a little bit more on his work and have a little bit more of a study of his films. But I think Cat O' Nine Tails is definitely a good addition to his catalog. I still need to see quite a bit of his films, and I need to see Tenebra, Demons, things like that. And I also need to see other directors like Bava and Fulci. Those are the directors I still need to see. But yeah, how many of you have seen The Cat O' Nine Tails? I'm kind of curious down in the comment section down below. Let's actually move on from here to Kino Lorber. All right, so now we're moving away from Arrow to Kino Lorber, and to a film that at the time when I watched this, I was definitely crunched on time and didn't want to watch a very long film. So this movie is actually only 62 minutes long, and it's from 1940. I'm talking about Boris Karloff in The Ape. And this was actually a really good movie. I was actually really surprised, because I kind of got this relatively cheap during one of the Kino Lorber sales. I want to say I spent $4 or $5 on it, maybe $6 on it. And I was just kind of expecting a sci-fi horror kind of amalgam of that. It kind of turned out to be a little bit more like Murders in the Rue Morgue, you know, the Bela Lugosi film. It's a little bit more like that, where it's like a mad scientist and this ape that was from like the circus. It's really cool, but I actually really enjoyed this movie, and I think it's really tight and succinct in, like, you know, its time period, because this came out right before, you know, like the Wolfman. So it's around that Universal period where you would see a lot of those films kind of being made. And The Ape is definitely a really good one. And I think, because there is a Kino Lorber sale going on right now, I think a lot of people should check this one out. The Ape is actually quite a lot of fun, and I don't know if it's on sale or not, but it's a really good one, and I quite enjoyed it. And it's, you know, it's worth the time that you spend with it, I think. And there's some really fun effects too, because obviously the ape is just this giant man, like this man in the suit. So it looks a little silly, but, you know, it's a lot of fun. So The Ape, check it out. All right, let's actually move on from here to Cohen Media. And so I actually watched 2 Cohen Media films. One is actually something that I talked about not that long ago. I was just talking about A Room with a View in my last film, my Criterion haul that I got. I actually also talked about that I watched Howard's End. So this is the 4K restoration, the new 25th anniversary. This feels delightful, by the way. I love this box. So this right here is the 25th anniversary of the Cohen Media version of it. I know there's a Criterion that's out of print, but I'm really happy to have this one, because this has a bunch of special features on it. And I actually was able to watch a little bit of some of the special features, but Anthony Hopkins, Vanessa Redgrave, Helena Bonham Carter, and Emma Thompson are in this film, and man, delightful. This movie is just gorgeous. It's absolutely beautiful. That's what some of the special features that I watched, so I watched the transfers and kind of seeing how some things got highlighted and some things got brightened and things really kind of popped. The cinematography in this film is just absolutely, like, you know, it drew me in. And also, like, the dialogue. I guess this is a film, because I've been in a weird period where I've been wanting to watch something like Downton Abbey. I've been wanting to watch these period pieces, and Howard's End is certainly a really, really great one, and I would certainly highly recommend it. I don't know if this is available as much recently. I haven't really looked into it, but I've had this on my shelf for like 3 years, 2 or 3 years, and I'm really happy that I finally watched it, and it kind of just sparked my interest in James Ivory, right? And so now I'm curious to watch more of his films and more of that production company that he has. And so Howard's End, this is a really great edition. Has a lot of really cool stuff with it as well. I won't say everything in it, but it's got deluxe edition stuff, has a lot of stuff in it, and really is really nice. So now we're going to move on to another Cohen Media film, and this one I actually picked up from a pawn shop, I want to say in Columbia, when I visited my friend Daniel. And yeah, this was a really cool blind buy that I just happened to be like glossing over Cohen Media because I just recently watched Howard's End, and I'm like, I've had some of these movies on my shelf for a long time, so I'm going to watch this. So I finally watched The Liberator, and this is starring Edgar Ramirez, and this came out in 2013. This is really, really good. I was blown away because I literally knew nothing about it. It's about Simon Bolivar, or however you want to say it, the great emancipator, the liberator, if you will, during a time, and a very tumultuous time in South America, when the Spanish Empire still had a lot of control over a lot of the territories and now, you know, countries of these places in South America. And so it's just such a beautiful, beautiful film, and not just beautiful in the atmosphere and the scenery and like the cinematography, but in the acting. Edgar Ramirez as Bolivar, or however you want to say it. Bolivar here because there's actually a town called Bolivar, and it's actually named after him, which is really weird. But anyway, the acting from Edgar Ramirez is just stunning. I've never really looked into his filmography before, but I just really was enamored by his performances, and I really loved seeing kind of his struggle and seeing him come and go in and out of remission and coming to the role that he played. And I just thought it was a really, really great film, and one that like may have had a I don't know how much of a production it had, but it was phenomenal. This is a film that is not really talked about much, and I really highly recommend it. It's very, your eyes are going to be glued to the film the entire time. And so yeah, The Liberator. How many of you have seen it? I'm actually really curious about this one because it's not really talked about that much. Now we're going to move on to some Criterions. So now we're going to move on to a Criterion film. This is actually a film from 1930 and is a war film, and it's not All Quiet on the Western Front. It is West Front 1918, and this is actually directed by G.W. Pabst. And this is really interesting because I don't think I had seen previously really much World War II World War I films, because I'm thinking 1918. I don't know. Anyway, World War I films, maybe portraying the German side, but it really does just showcase this unit, really kind of focuses on one person, but it really kind of showcases this unit and all the struggles of post-war, or like, you know, some war where like, okay, well, you need to go home for this deployment, and you know, you have something going on, so you need to go back home and get off the front line, and then coming back to it, and in and out of that, and mixed in with like trench warfare and a lot of the horrors of war that at the time hadn't been seen before. And during 1918, you know, the year, this is like near the end of World War II, or I keep saying World War II. This is near the end of World War I because 1914 is when it started. And so it is interesting to kind of see a lot of that mental anguish, because the way this film ends is on a very agonizing note. And it is a really, really great film from a very great technical aspect, because this movie is almost like a documentary in a way, where like I was just telling you about the dramatization of the troops and like the story, but it's not really about the story. It's really about the trench warfare, and it really kind of just shows a lot of that, and long takes too, and it really shows you a lot of the technical aspects from the camera work that Pabst puts together, and it's just really, really well done, and it kind of just goes like throws you back into this time period and of stuff that actually was really contemporary and relevant to the time that this came out in. And it just shows you from an anti-war perspective in some manners how this would play out in the German side. And I actually really enjoyed it. It had some really funny moments in it too, because it's very human. It's a very human film. That's what this one feels like. And Criterion did a really great job with this, and I did watch some of the special features here, and I think it's a wonderful film that's really not talked about much in the Criterion collection, but I definitely picked it up not that long ago and was able to finally watch it. So I'm curious to know how many of you have seen West Front 1918. Let's actually move on from here to Twilight Time. All right, so we're near the end of the video, and we have a few more titles to talk about, but the first one I'm going to be talking about is from Twilight Time. It is a film that I thought was a Western. It kind of is, but it's almost more like a noir, and I'm talking about Inferno in 3D. And so this film is actually directed by Roy Ward Baker, who has directed some really great horror films that I really like, but I didn't know he directed this one, and Inferno was a lot of fun. It's about this millionaire, or this guy who's just kind of a dope, if you will. And his wife tries to kill him by, like, you know, breaking his leg and sitting him out in the middle of the desert, where his wife's lover and her kind of come up with this plan to leave him out there while they kind of come back and wait for, you know, this business deal to go awry, so where they can get the money and that they can get escape. But he has to die, and he has to be confirmed. But like, oh, we got to figure out where his body is. He's out in the middle of the desert surviving, and they don't really expect him to get out of this situation. And you know, he survives, and it's got a really great direction, like I said, by Roy Ward Baker. But we also have Robert Ryan, who is the star of the film right here. We also have Rhonda Fleming and William Lundigan, who is like the wife and then like the lover. But yeah, Robert Ryan, he's just a really, really great character who's kind of like a dope at the beginning, and then kind of learns through his, you know, adversity, getting and escaping and living out through the desert with a broken leg. He gets through this situation, and like I said, it's paced like a noir, and it feels like a noir, and I really love it. And it's from 1953, so it is during that time period where noirs were kind of fading out and into you know, the 50s, right? So Inferno. How many of you have seen this? I know that this version is not really available anymore because Twilight Time. But yeah, I'm kind of curious to know how many of you have seen that one. It's really great. So let's actually talk about some Warner Archives, because the Warner Archive sale is coming up right around the corner. Or if you're watching this now, it might just be happening now. So let's actually talk about a few things, and I can recommend some things too. So the first film from the Warner Archive collection that I watched all the way back in the early February was during like a Sunday afternoon, and I just felt like watching it, is Jeremiah Johnson, a Sidney Pollack film. And I had talked about this film not that long ago with the Snowed In edition, and I really enjoyed my time watching Jeremiah Johnson again, because I had watched it in the past, maybe in junior high or high school, sometime in my middle upbringing of school, but I really remember loving this movie, and just seeing this guy kind of go into the mountains and just almost dying left and right. And yeah, it's a beautiful film, and I think it's a really well done Robert Redford performance, and it's got some really cool songs in it too. And I don't know, I think Warner Archive just recently put this one out. But so this is definitely one of my recommendations. If any of you haven't seen this one, it's a lot of fun, at least in my book. It just brought back a lot of memories for me. So the last film that I'm going to recommend from Warner Archive is The Stalking Moon with Gregory Peck from 1969. This is actually directed by Robert Mulligan, who was with Gregory Peck in To Kill a Mockingbird, or he directed that film. So they team up again, but they also teamed up with producer Alan J. Pakula, who also was a part of that team as well, for The Stalking Moon. So Gregory Peck, Eva Maria Saint. We have this Western about a Comanche captive who she is like a white woman who was captured years and years ago by a Comanche tribe and forced to become a wife and had a kid. And Gregory Peck accidentally gets in this situation to where he needs to protect her and the son, the kid, from that Comanche who is stalking them and trying to kill them. And it actually has a lot of really great tension moments. And so this is a really great film that really isn't talked about because it's 1969. These Westerns a lot of them have moved on to like the spaghetti Westerns, gotten a little bit more grit to it. And this film also has a lot of grit to it as well. So I think it's really interesting that Gregory Peck, this is a film that's not really talked about much with his performances, but I actually really enjoyed it. And it was a really great Sunday afternoon watch. But yeah, those are all the films that I had watched recently for the month of February to early March. I'm kind of curious, like I said, down in the comment section down below, tell me what have you been watching? What do you plan on picking up during this Warner Archive sale? There's a Kino sale going on. Also, I think at the time that I'm doing this, there's an Indicator sale. There's a lot of sales going on. But yeah, I'm curious to know what you're going to be picking up for those as well. But thank you so much for watching this video. Give it a like, comment down below, share, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you next time. I'm not jonesing around.